All right, Guru Nation, I promised you when it comes to anything macro that affects our industry, clinical research industry, or us in the investment community with some of these biotechs, I'm going to bring you the information the way I see it. So I decided to do a deep dive because I also at my core, at least on the macro, on the surface level, I'm a fan of Marty Makary. I'm a fan of Vinay Prasad. I actually resonated with Prasad's book, Malignant, that he wrote in 2020, way before I'm assuming he ever even dreamed that he would be the head of CBER. And Macary's book, Blind Spots, I think I resonate with a lot of it as well. They are actually exposing their own weaknesses with lack of communication, lack of maybe stability, despite the fact that they came to be authentic and transparent. I actually am undecided on what I think about this administration. I guess I'll leave it as cautiously optimistic still. When they first started, I was actually very scared. Like, what is going to happen to clinical research as a whole? They were actually talking about relying on a lot of real world evidence, studies, and I'm a research site owner. So I was thinking, okay, are they trying to like minimize the importance of research sites? They were also talking about drugs are too expensive. At the same time, Trump was talking about most favored nation pricing status. I was scared. Then I just kept seeing more studies coming my way at my research site here in Yuma, Arizona. So I started to relax a little bit. But then on the investment side, I started seeing CRL after CRL. So those are complete response letters from the FDA, basically rejections for new investigational products. And then I started looking at my investments, Iovance and Aquestive, and that's what led me to do this research was really from a selfish perspective of are my investments okay? And I'm coming out on the other side of the research. My research is not done, and this is a dynamic, very fluid situation. We're talking profound uncertainty, whiplash is what my article said. Uh, FDA crisis after crisis, flipping the script on high value assets like cell and gene therapies. Now, it's no secret that Vinay Prasad, who's in charge of cell and gene therapy with CBER, is actually not a fan. He's actually said, why would we ever approve a gene therapy for condition X if we already have medications for condition X? I think he used hypertension as an example. Like, what's wrong with lisinopril? What's wrong with losartan? As a general premise, it's hard to disagree with him. But there's a fine line between stifling innovation and using common sense approach to running the FDA. And I think they're learning that on the fly, but I think a lot of people are pissed now. There's patients that are pissed, but there are also patients that I'm going to play a video that agree with them. So stick around for the next 15 minutes or so as we kind of unpack this chaos, the key players, and what I think it means for the future. And it's on these leaders to fix this mess. I mean, they literally came out on day one and said, we are looking at rare disease. We don't like Me Too. Biologics are too expensive, blah, blah, blah. They've got a great podcast, even. Commendable stuff. But I think it needs to zero in now. Their own podcast is a double-edged sword because the fact that they don't want to discuss these topics that the community is actually interested in. When you build your foundation supposedly on trust and authenticity, self-inflicted wounds hit hard, like they cut twice as deep. Meaning they had a guy from CDER, so not CBER, but CDER, CDER, George Tidmarsh. He just resigned 2 days ago. That dude is probably super accomplished in his career, in his life. And so far, he's most famous for this, for using his position as a vendetta against his former business enemies, which used to be prior to that his business allies. So uh, that's not cool. That's not what we're fans of, and I think that's something they should address head on. Same as the reasons for the complete response letters. I mean, one of the things this FDA did was they're giving reasons why, and they're making the complete response letters public. Now, critics say, well, now the competitors can see and they can just wait for a CRL and then do their own studies. Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point. But critics say, well, that's going to de-incentivize people from investing in research in the first place. I don't know. I don't think so, but they need to address these things, I think. And they're not addressing these issues. So this is a call to action. If any of them are watching, I doubt it, but maybe. I would like on one of your next episodes, Dr. Macri and Prasad, super smart people. I think it's commendable what you're trying to do with the podcast, what you're trying to do as far as gaining public trust. But there's a lot of people, a lot more people, even more distrustful of the FDA now than they were before you guys took over. So there is a little bit of like hypocrisy there that I hope goes away. I hope these are growing pains. Vinay Prasad himself stepped down. Uh, he's a sharp critic of regulatory shortcuts. He hates surrogate endpoints, kind of slammed the brakes on flexibility, demanded stringent standards, so demanding randomized controlled trials and hard clinical endpoints like overall survival, which in cancer makes sense. No more relying on surrogate markers like biomarkers or immunogenicity data. I think you need to read between the lines of whatever you're investing in and make sure it's following the idealistic playbook or checklist of an A Prasad. I mean, that's how you've got to look at this thing going forward if you're an investor. And if you're a sponsor, same thing. So the other day, Unicure, it had a gene therapy for Huntington's disease. AMT-130 was the investigational product, still is the investigational product. Just months ago, it got breakthrough therapy designation, and the FDA seemed aligned. Then, just 2 days ago, a reversal. The phase 1/2 data was deemed inadequate for marketing. The company claimed a 75% slowdown in disease progression, but it used non-randomized external controls. Sieber said, no way, demanded blinded, rigorous evidence. Now the critics are saying, well, how is it possible? Um, there's no other standard of care, and these patients are dying as is. And the stock took a hit, 67%. Now there's speculation as to this is going to be looked at again. Clearly, this is a big issue for both Unicure and the FDA. Um, Now, there's a difference between these heterogeneous gene, kind of heterogeneous diseases like Huntington's versus homogeneous diseases like sickle cell, where there's just really one variable. Like some of these conditions are like Huntington's, like neurodegenerative diseases, like spinocerebral ataxia, like Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. These are heterogeneous. Like there's a lot of variables that contribute to that disease. There's different genetic makeups that contribute. Different cohorts are going to react differently. I get the premise that you can't just selectively choose a certain cohort and then say that this is going to apply to all of them, all the patients. So I kind of get it, but what's the alternative, right? And you're going to hear from some supporters of this, like scientific rigor, it's defensible, but at what cost? But then being scientifically flexible is also defensible, but at what cost? Like patients might die still. right? And so, matter of fact, I'm going to get into that right now. Just the other day, Biohaven's Viglixia got hit with a CRL, and this is a prodrug that targets glutamate levels for a very rare neurodegenerative disease called SCA or spinocerebellar ataxia. It affects about 15,000 people in the US with zero approved therapies. And the FDA had given them prior feedback, approved the protocol, approved the statistical plan, orphan drug, and fast track designations, even priority review. But then what happened the other day? Complete response letter. And what the FDA stated, they cited flaws in the real world evidence study using external controls. So biases, the ones I mentioned, heterogeneous medical conditions versus homogeneous ones, design issues, unmeasured confounders. Despite the data showing 50 to 70% slowing of the progression with statistical significance on key endpoints, it wasn't enough for the FDA. So Biohaven's disappointed and pushing for a meeting, stressing the need for flexibility in rare diseases. It looks like their FDA was not clear on when real-world evidence data is acceptable and when it's not. So there's another example with Sarepta Therapeutics, and there's rumors that this is why Vinay Prasad resigned to spend more time with his family. The first time, the first time he resigned in June, I believe it was June or July, they snagged accelerated approval for Elevidys in Duchenne muscular dystrophy based on surrogate endpoints. But then they had their exon skipping therapies like Amondys 45, Vyondys 53. They flopped in the trial, failing the primary motor function endpoint after 96 weeks. No stats significant versus placebo. At sky high prices, this underscores Prasad's core thesis that surrogate approvals need validation with real clinical benefits. Plus, intensified the safety checks, like the temporary halt on Elevidys after patient deaths from acute liver failure, set a bar for maximum certainty in the pricey cell and gene therapies. Now, to be fair, Prasad, this is literally his playbook. This one is not as bad as Biohaven or as Unicure. Like this one, they actually did drop the ball. And here's a mother. I'm going to play this video. This is a mother of a Duchenne patient who's been vocal against Sarepta, and she aligns with this rigor, and there's many others like her. Calls out the poor study designs, and it's not virtue signaling to say, oh, because a lot of investors do this, and I can't stand it. Oh, it's about the patients. If you reject this, you're you're removing access from patients. And yeah, that's true in a lot of cases, but in a lot of cases, it's poor study design. And so let me just play this for you. I think it's like a minute or so.
Hi, I have a really quick question.
Two more, yep. Okay.
Hi, I'm sorry to be rude, but I called on Sarepta. You have 3 drugs that are accelerated approval that are conditioned upon future clinical trials, which have not been completed. Now you're on your 5th drug, sitting up here asking all of us to be part of your drug, experimental drug, but you don't do any of the follow-up studies. You don't produce any of the data. You haven't delivered any of this evidence you're supposed to have for your $3.2 million drug. You don't think you can do a little more effort and give us a little bit more information? So now I've got my spidey senses up and I feel like something's wrong, where you've got 5 drugs in the works that have not been fully approved. While they're accelerated approval, the confirmatory trials that were required by the FDA have not been done. And I'm talking years. So if you're looking for your son who's not ambulatory to get the results of some study from you, fat chance.
I hear your frustration and I appreciate
No, you're sucking the air out of the room is what you're doing. When you expand a label from 4 and 5-year-olds to everybody, you don't think we're going to get suspicious? You don't think we're going to ask questions? This is a lifetime decision, all right? You're the Betamax of gene therapy. You're the very beginning. We're going to get stuff from the cloud. And you're asking us to put everything on the line, but you give us nothing in return. You don't see how we're all... And at a certain point, we're going to turn on you. and you're gonna like cannibalize your young, right? We're the people who give you the millions of dollars, but you're not giving us anything back, which is facts, data, and science. You're just like taking money.
So Prasad is not without supporters with the call for rigor. And I think they just have to clarify between when real world evidence is acceptable and when it's not. And maybe it's just screening out for the particular biomarkers, but then the label shouldn't be this is going to be for everyone with this condition if it's just been tested on one of the genetic variants that make up, in the case of SCA, 40% of those patients. So they're not without rationale. It's scientifically sound. I mean, it's guarding against overhyped, unsafe treatment. But the prices, regulatory inconsistencies, and abrupt turnarounds on Unicure and Biohaven after initial green lights, this is critics are saying it's not principled rigor, and I tend to agree. It breeds confusion, chokes innovation in tough areas like Huntington's or SCA, where we actually want to incentivize companies to do more, right? And where flawless trials might not be possible, they might even be unethical. And the FDA issued guidances earlier this year, like I said, on rare diseases promoting flexibility, but then they're seemingly ignoring them with these complete response letters. So it's sending mixed messages, and it's not just the operational mayhem inside the FDA. There's been a lot of internal friction, which is, I think, time for Prasad to discuss this now that George Tidmarsh is out, but they seem to have had a beef. There was a slow boiling feud where the staff were exiting from Prasad's department. There was a culture of mistrust and paranoia into Tidmarsh's department, and then Tidmarsh basically used his position in a separate incident against a former business partner turned enemy. Uh, so this ethical dysfunction, as well as the rigid science that doesn't seem to have any room for flexibility, or maybe it has selective room for flexibility. I think we need more transparency around this. And it's definitely shattered confidence amongst patients and investors. Without the investors, you're not going to get more drugs being experimented on. And so we need this kind of transparency and authenticity from them. So I think reading Prasad's book is a must. The ripple effects from this is going to be massive. Biotech needs long timelines and predictable regulations, but it seems like the rules flip every few months, and analysts are calling it the most destructive approach for a science-driven field. Companies like Sarepta, Unicure, Biohaven, Moderna, and Allogene billions have been evaporated from the market value. And the FDA's, I think their rare disease evidence principles, they had a RDEP guidance on innovation and trials is a good start, where they're balancing rigor with rare disease realities. I discussed this with Darshan Kulkarni, but I think rare disease advocates should demand better, and investors should stay vigilant, really like read their books and use it as a playbook. I think this is a call to action for Macri and Prasad as well to get this under control. And I'm hoping they will. I think they're gonna have to at this point. I don't think they can run the FDA this way with this much uncertainty. I think they're gonna have to release some guidances or at least have candid conversations with the investment community and the public at large about this. But do your own due diligence, and whatever you're doing, there's a very long tail of these kind of drugs and companies out there. You need to really read through the lines and see if it matches up with the current administration's checklist, which is admittedly arbitrary and chaotic. And hopefully it's going to have more clarity. I think we're going to need to have more clarity to have a stable marketplace where investors feel some degree of confidence, because it's risky as is as an investor and as a drug company. Darshan Kulkarni said it best. To be a drug company is crazy. It's like going to the casino every day for 10 years, including weekends, and betting $2 million dollars and leaving and coming back the next day betting $2 million, dollars, leaving, not knowing if you're gonna win until the end of this 10 years or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's faster now and they're expedited. Maybe it's 5 or 4. It's still insanity. And now to throw on top of that uncertainty when it comes to the regulatory standards is too much. So I think Vinay Prasad, Marty Makary, I think they're smart. I think they're going to figure this out. I think they're working overtime right now on coming up with some kind of guidance. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Let me know what you think. I'll catch you later. Link to my article is underneath this video. Bye bye.